Coffee where you are. My name is Fred Indimuli.
And I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyarungita. It is the 8th day of the 8th month of 2023. Most definitely welcome to Morning Cafe, where we start your day the best way we know how.
Well, good morning, and I trust you are having a good one. I trust you woke up well and very ready for this edition of Morning Cafe. Definitely, we have a great show lined up for you this morning. You have to keep it TV47 for that show. And of course, on the other side, we'll be having a conversation on financial planning. You do not want to miss that as well. I'm Flora Limuke.
To the top story now. In about 24 hours or less, Kenya will mark exactly 1 year since the August 9, 2022 general elections. 365 days later, Kenyans are still grappling with a high cost of living, acute unemployment, and reduced incomes at the household level. All this happening amid high-octane politics that continues to dominate the headlines. This week, teams from Kenya Kwanza and the Azimio coalition will be holding talks to try and resolve the political impasse that has at times threatened the security and unity of the country. Those talks are set to kick off on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Now, President William Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga have meanwhile maintained that despite the talks, they are not interested in a handshake arrangement. And so as we look forward to mark 1 year since the elections, today we ask, are you satisfied with the choice you made at the ballot 1 year ago? Are you satisfied with the choices you made at the ballot 1 year ago? I know you may focus too much on the presidency, but remember, you chose other leaders as well. Are you satisfied with the choices you made? You can text us at, you can send your feedback at TV47 News on X and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya, and we'll be sampling some of your views as we continue with the show. For now, let's get the day's diary.
Right, and on today's diary, we do have the top story, by the way, today. President William Ruto is still in Mount Kenya today, and he'll be meeting with members of his cabinet and also area leaders at the Sagana State Lodge, which is in Kirinyaga, and we were obviously discussing this yesterday, how big of a deal it is going to be. And from the sources there, reporters say the main discussion might really be the affordable housing scheme, and he will also be commissioning a KCC plant in Kiganjo, that is in Kieni constituency. In the National Assembly order paper today, among the topics that will be discussed today, the legislators will be convening around 2:30 p.m. to debate issues regarding the climate change amendment bill and also excise duty amendment regulations 2023, well, among others. From that, Greenpeace Africa will hold a panel discussion to raise the concerns on the lifting of the logging ban. And also from that, the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development, that is RCMRD 2023 conference, begins today in Nairobi. The aim of the conference is to offer an opportunity to geoscience experts to inform policy, and we'll be briefing you on that. Remember, from 9 to 10, we'll be having a whole wide bath of diary, taking a look at other counties from where you are, what is happening where you are. We'll be linking with our correspondents for that. Now we can get into the newspaper review, Fred and Flora. I do have the Daily Nation here and also the Standard.
Yes, I do have. Let me go straight to the Daily Nation this morning. And the big headline on the Daily Nation: forced NYS-style drill for students. In the 80s, students underwent pre-university National Youth Service training. Now mandatory 3 months community service after senior school, as well as 9 months upon completing university and college, will be required of graduates before securing employment if education reforms by a presidential task force are implemented. The story is on page 7. And I remember us discussing this earlier, sometime last week. This are coming from the recommendations of the Presidential Working Party on education reforms. And one of those issues they proposed is mandatory community service. Yeah. They're calling it here on the Daily Nation forced NYS-style drill for students. It will be interesting. And this is something that probably could impact on the discipline and skills of a number of graduates. Another top story featured on the front page is right there below the main headline. Ruto, Raila rule out power sharing ahead of crucial talks. President Ruto sustained the onslaught on the opposition, declaring that his government will speedily conclude negotiations with rivals so long as power sharing is not on the table. National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah insists on open talks to public at Bomas of Kenya tomorrow. So yes, starting tomorrow, there could be the initial talks before the talks.
Back to Bomas, though.
Back to Bomas. They were insisting on public spaces.
A whole year later, back
Yes.
to Bomas.
Back to Bomas.
We'll be back to Bomas. On the top strip of the Daily Nation today, dam scandal. Senators Farmers paid 2 billion shillings for this ticket, and they actually have a picture of that ticket that cost the taxpayer 2 billion shillings. In 2009, Midrock Water Drilling Company, owned by Mohammed Chute, now Marsabit senator, started construction of Badassa Dam. On completion, it would have stored 5 billion cubic meters of water, sufficient to quench the thirst of long-suffering residents of Marsabit town. But today, there is no such water fountain, only a deep money pit in a shrub. And they actually have that photo there. Wow.
Interesting how even the shrub itself is dry, no signs of water there.
2 billion shillings.
Dried out, literally.
Dried out. I like that. On the right-hand strip of the front page of the Daily Nation today, a very interesting story here on relationships. The law change to end messy divorces. A bill before the National Assembly proposes to amend the law to allow an estranged couple to separate by mutual consent. Interesting. The story is on page 14 of the Daily Nation today. Right below it, radical plan for state to control matatu fares. An MP wants a Transport Cabinet Secretary empowered to set statutory fees charged by public service vehicles in various routes nationwide.
I'm pretty sure the voice that even the Matatu Association, pardon me, will have on this, because again, it's always a whole, for them, they really have to control, you know, how things go about that. And even when the fuel hikes, they really want to see. Yes. Mostly, but when it rains, normally you pay maybe 70 bob or even 50 bob, but then it rains and you're told no, it's 150 bob. So
I don't know how it's going to work if you have the cabinet secretary now setting matatu fares and saying this you cannot charge beyond this on this route. It's interesting. The last time we saw that kind of intervention from a cabinet secretary, I know you may not remember, there was a gentleman by the name John Mishuki, way back some decades ago. And he actually brought a raft of far-reaching reforms in the public transport sector. And this kind of intervention from the transport secretary could be something quite similar to that. Whether or not it will work, we wait and see.
But then, as we always say, every day, you learn something.
Learn something.
Well, that's the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. Stanley, you have the Standard? Or
the Standard.
Limuki?
Let me have a look at the Standard. The headline for the Standard this morning is Ruto maintains tough conditions ahead of talks. President yesterday said he is ready for dialogue with the opposition, but won't be blackmailed using violence. That power sharing is off the table, as his henchmen also ruled out talks on cost of living. Perhaps just read this statement here by the president. I heard our brothers in the opposition agree with us that they, just like us, are opposed to handshake. Now that they have declared so, they should go ahead and agree on ending violence. Through that, we shall agree on everything else. That was, of course, the president speaking yesterday in Nyeri County during his 5-day tour of the Mount Kenya region. And hopes and fears of school leavers who shunned KUPS slots. Close to 600,000 students who sat for KCSE last year did not opt for placement to universities or colleges. For some, the cost was prohibitive, but for others, it was out of ignorance.
It's a very curious and worrying trend.
Yes.
And last week we were talking about this when the report was released, and we were talking about the whole how back in the day and right now the numbers have dwindled so far.
Oh yes.
And the reasons underneath.
The thing is, I would understand if at all they still presented themselves or still applied for the positions.
Absolutely.
Then for one reason or another failed to take them up, but totally ignoring and staying away from
It's
this
sad,
it's really worrying, because it tells you the kind of thinking or the psyche in the Kenyan youth that education is not that important right now.
Because I would imagine it doesn't cost them a dime to even apply for these courses in universities. You'd better try then. Stop along the way, but ignoring completely is
What I'm
worrying.
foreseeing, especially with this trend, is we've come from a time where university degrees became commonplace.
Yes.
Initially, they were very scarce. Not everyone could be able to go to university. Then, during Kibaki time, he came and he liberalized the whole education sector, handed university charters to so many private universities, and within 2-3 years, everyone had a university degree, or someone at least was pursuing university degrees. As you see right now, we have too many people with university degrees and no jobs. Then this generation comes and they're not interested in university degrees. So after a while, we'll have a shortage of university graduates.
It's interesting. Or probably more jobs, less graduates to even give these jobs to. Still on the Standard, we have the Go to Shame, elders abandoned, abused in the home. That is a story I think that was extensively done, a feature by the BBC. It's something worrying as well. But you can find the story on page 3 of the Standard this morning. And Socian feeds power to national grid, some business there on page 27. And Uasin Gishu leaders at the bottom strip of the Standard. Uasin Gishu leaders in eye of storm over botched varsity fund. I would have imagined it's the devolution conference, but oopsie. Still on the Standard. Matters Arsenal here. Day 2 of Arsenal. This week, after City romp, Arsenal ready for title chase. We are ready for this season.
Well, all right. And speaking of matters being ready, on the People Daily, even away from the top story that they're going with, or the top strip of the People Daily this morning, still in matters education, varsity students face high fees. Let me just expand that to have it visible. Public universities have raised charges for learners seeking to enroll in September, but will the government loan them the difference? Still largely on what we're really talking about. That is a People Daily. Now on the top story this morning, court acts tough on high fuel tax. Regulator summoned. Aprobos Kipto risks jail for contempt of a levy. Judges declined to stop sections of controversial Finance Act. Cases to be heard on September 13th and 14th. That story is on page 4. And below that, the bottom strip, we will finish all stalled projects, Ruto tells Mountain. This is not the first time he's saying that, so we wait to see how that will be. That is on the People Daily. And remember yesterday Fred saying him as the president, he has the liberty to be launching these projects so as he wishes. Let me also take a look at Taifa Leo this morning. Before we cross over, Taifa Leo also had to go with Arsenal, but I will not take a look at that.
Fred, I can take a look at that.
We'll give it cover.
But because again, you're talking about what President William Ruto will do and does not do, Taifa Leo goes with a very interesting highlight this morning. Ruto apokonya Gachagua kazi. Kwa nini? According to Taifa Leo, Rais William Ruto sasa aonekana kuchukua jukumu la kulainisha sekta ya kahawa kutoka kwa naibu rais Rigathi Gachagua baada ya kutangaza Jumapili kwamba yeye binafsi ndiye atakabiliana na watu wenye ushawishi wanaodhibiti sekta hiyo. Habari kamili katika ukurasa wa pili. Okay, quite interesting there. On the left strip of Taifa Leo, sitaki serikali yako, Raila aambie rais. Kinara wa Azimio asisitiza kwamba hana haja na nusu mkate kutoka serikali iliyojaa ufisadi. And koti yakataa kusitisha ulipaji kodi ya nyumba. Jopo la majaji 3 la pinga ombi la chama cha LSK kuzima utekelezaji sheria ya fedha mwaka 2023. Ni hayo tu katika Taifa Leo.
Umewacha Arsenal. Arsenal roho juu baada ya kulima City. Ateta ahidi wafuasi makuu msimu ujao baada ya ushindi. You know that thing about
we as Manchester United fans, we beg.
Do you see Manchester United or Manchester City anywhere on the headlines? It's Arsenal.
We beg that we move on.
Let's be fair to the guys featured. Let's be fair.
We are not attention seekers. We don't need newspaper coverage.
If you do not deserve a headline, we shall not give you one.
Absolutely.
We shall stick to
unless
those who
you've won
deserve
another
headlines.
Carabao Cup.
The winners so far are Arsenal. So yes, another daily to look at this morning, Business Daily. Shilling hits 150 against US dollar. That's the front page of the Business Daily today. Wow. And I don't know, we've always been talking about, yes, we're going to hit 150 very soon. We're going to hit 150 finally.
It's here.
The dollar hit a 150 against the US dollar. So official CBK rate stands at 142. Debt and imports major casualties. Now the thing is the CBK rate must stand at 142.98. But if you go buying this dollar at any bank or foreign exchange, they'll sell it at 150. Another headline on the front page of the Business Daily, EPRA boss faces day in court over fuel taxes row. The Director General, Daniel Kipto, has been summoned to explain why he disregarded a court order suspending the implementation of the Finance Act 2023 and adjusted fuel prices. Yes, he actually did it before while the Finance Act had been suspended by the courts, and so he'll have to answer for that. Yeah. Other headlines of other stories that feature on the front page: Transport CS to control bus fares in proposed law. Interesting. I think it was also on the front page of the Daily Nation. Puzzle of how 1,984 cartons of wine were consumed and empty bottles returned while inside Mombasa port. A 40-feet container imported with alcoholic beverages and stored in a custom-bonded warehouse at the Mombasa port has been discovered with empty bottles during verification by Kenya Revenue Authority. Interesting. And
how long did it take for them to consume all this?
Well, it tells a different story. You never know. Maybe someone imported empty bottles.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's because a 40-foot container is quite huge. How do you consume that and return the bottles? Then pension funds return rise to 6.4%. Yes, that's the front page of the Business Daily this morning. I don't know, do we have...
Time, this time, no. Perhaps time to cross the borders to Tanzania. Start off with Mwananchi. Kamari janga hatari vyuoni. That's I'm trying to save you guys. It's betting. Ndoto za wanafunzi wengi huishia njiani kwa kutumia ada, fedha za malazi kwenye kamari. Profesa Kusikula, this is a person now, aeleza ukubwa wa tatizo vyuoni na madhila yake aliyeliwa laki 400,000 za ada afunguka mazito. That is the whole conversation on betting. It's not only in Tanzania, but also back home.
It's interesting that this problem a few years back was actually a big issue here.
Yes.
It seems to have dissipated a bit. In Kenya, we're no longer discussing much about betting and the betting craze, but it was a big problem.
Yes.
Enough people, I know of people who actually left their jobs and they were basically just betting the whole day. Now it appears it crossed the border to our neighbors, and now it's making headlines.
I think it's still there even here. It's just perhaps people don't talk about it a lot, but yeah.
Well, do not downgrade their shilling.
Yes.
It may be 20k Kenyan shillings, but it's a lot of money there either way. With laki nne, you can do quite some shopping in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, still on the Mwananchi in Tanzania, the top strip, Lissu ashangaa dola kutoweka, azuru kaburi la Mawazo Geita. That's Tundu Lissu, Tundu Lissu, Tundu Lissu, yes. Still on Mwananchi, trying to see Samia ashusha neema wenye tatizo la nyonga matibabu bure. Okay, so that is what we have on the Mwananchi this morning. Big story there, the problem of betting in Tanzania.
I have the Citizen here. It says AU Miles Credit Rating Agency. So the African Union has initiated discussions about a continental credit rating agency, and quote unquote, that will offer more accurate, balanced and comprehensive opinions on African credit instruments. That story is on page 2. From that, but still on page 2, a task ahead for new TPSF chief. Mr. John Olanga has outlined his priorities following his appointment yesterday as chief executive of the Tanzania Private Sector Foundation. There's another quote there, Mama Samia Love initiative brings in 60 US specialist doctors. Right. Mpango's 5 directives to local councils on youth. VP Philip Mpango yesterday warned against rising immorality among youth and issued directives to local authorities meant to empower the group economically. On the top strip of the Citizen, matters national introduction, UNICEF appoints new country representative. Matters health, Tanzania, US a new drive to combat malaria. And in matters, still in matters Africa, national ultimatum, defiant Niger coup leaders await response. That is what is on the Citizen today.
Okay. I did not see us having the Star today, but probably tomorrow we'll get it. We also didn't get to see any paper from Uganda, and let me just see if at all we can trace one before we look at before we even take a look at the cartoons. You know, yes, in Uganda today, the Daily Monitor reads, Besigye whips for FDC. Forum for Democratic Change Party founding President Kizza Besigye fights back tears as he speaks out on the elephant in the room, the dirty money that is at the heart of the fracture of the party FDC. So it's interesting to see what's headlining in Uganda this morning. So back home, let's take a look at the cartoons. Stanley's favorite now.
Back home, in page 17 of the Daily Nation, Fred, you can do us the courtesy. Page 17 of the Daily Nation presents us that, and it brings us back in Mount Kenya. 3 caricatures that if you look at them very keenly, you and I might really know who they are. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, a caricature that looks like him, a caricature that looks like President William Ruto, and a caricature that looks like former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And the 3 lines there, the first one, former President Uhuru Kenyatta has already cut with the scissors, the yellow tape, and President William Ruto is really rushing to cut the second one. And Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is the last one there, smiling with the whole award stalled projects. Might be self-explanatory, but I'm curious what Fred and Flora have to say on that also. That is on the Daily Nation, page 17, and page 16 of the Standard this morning. Okay, I'm curious what Fred and Flora will have to say on those 2 caricatures, but one says, tomorrow it is at a venue of our choice. Matters dialogue, and
we moved on from the next
yeah.
Now okay,
I was just holding that one.
page 16.
Page 16.
Page 16 of the Standard, and the director is not even telling me, he's just having fun with this. I tell you.
I really had to have you holding it.
of live TV.
So there's a dog that's saying, do they know of video conferencing? Okay. I believe that it's the whole bit of, sending letters bit, and we were discussing that yesterday. Do they have to, keep writing to each other letters? Can we just call
video
them?
call.
Back and forth about where to hold the
Yeah.
And these letters are so bulky, mostly for the Kenya Kwanza side. I think they have a certain interesting font that they're writing with. So you'd rather just video call Kalonzo and tell him that.
I don't feel the cartoons today, to be honest. I
The-
don't think there's any that inspires or really strikes my fancy. Okay. Let me go with the one on the Standard today. Now talking about the lead up to the talks. Tomorrow it is at a venue of our choice, even haggling over who got to decide where they're going to hold the talks. I think we're going to have talks before talks, I think.
Yes, yeah. I think
So that is what we can expect for tomorrow.
For me, it's the Daily Nation, because we see allegedly the DP here holding the medal for stalled projects, and I'm sure by the time we come to 2027, all those stalled projects in Mount Kenya have been done away with, or they've been completed. And then here comes now President Ruto trying to finish his stalled projects, probably in the next term. So here we know who's winning here. Yeah, but that's just my sentiments this morning.
Right, and the director even reminds us on page 16, just below the cartoon this morning, the whole matter is cyber attacks. This is how Kenya can avoid another crippling cyber attack. The writers are data protection and cyber security experts with the PwC Kenya. So you can dig into that and get to know. Remember, by the way, we had a whole question last week on matters. How do you really have the trust of Kenya's cybersecurity?
Yes.
Yes. Well, our director is reminding us of the whole WorldCoin conversation, and I saw a headline yesterday about the WorldCoin data servers crashing or something like that. I think there were too many hits on it, and that's the kind of risk we were running last week. Yeah, once you have collected all that data, what do you do with it? A reminder of a question this morning. As we look forward to marking 1 year after the elections, today we ask, are you satisfied with the choices you made at the ballot 1 year ago? And I don't want us to confine ourselves to just discussing the presidency. We elected MCAs, members of the National Assembly, senators, governors. Are you satisfied with the choices you made at the ballot 1 year ago? We'll be marking exactly 1 year since we went to the polls tomorrow morning. So today is an opportunity for us to actually examine our role as voters, and if at all we are satisfied with our choices.
Most definitely, and send in your comments and feedback. I'll be taking a look at them as the show progresses on TV47 News, that is on X, or if you prefer Twitter, TV47 Kenya, that is on Facebook, mine at Nyaringita _ at Limoki _F, and at Fred Indemoli.
Yes, and we'll be getting down to that discussion with our panelists after the break. You're watching Morning Cafe.
Good morning.
He's been
Watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Ndimuli, and I'm just trying to include my panelists to the conversation today. And let me introduce my panelists today. Arnold Maliba, Public Policy Analyst. It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
You say your Twitter handle is at Maliba Arnold.
Yes.
And we're also having Faris Jain, Chairperson, Mount Kenya Colleges and University Students Association.
Yes.
Are you next?
Yeah.
What's your handle?
At Faris_Jane.
At Faris_Jane.
Jane.
And we'll be including them, tagging them onto the conversation so that you can actually respond and interact with us as we go on. Remember our question today, and it's coming from a story about looking forward to marking 1 year since the elections last year. And as we look forward to do that, are you satisfied with the choices you made at the ballot 1 year ago? And we say that today we're taking the conversation beyond the presidency or beyond the presidential election because we elected quite a number of other leaders, ranging from the governor, senator, member of the National Assembly, as well as the MCAs. And are you satisfied with the choices you made at the ballot 1 year ago? Keep sending your comments. Gentlemen, today quite different headlines. There's only one probably on the talks that is captured in all the main dailies today. But before we even get to that, I'd like us to talk more about education because it's also featured on the front page. On the Standard, hopes and fears of school leavers who shunned cooked slots. Close to 600,000 students who sat for KCSE last year did not opt for placement to universities or colleges, for the cost was prohibitive. But for others, it was out of ignorance. That's on the front page of the Standard. And let's start off from there, because even on the front page of the Daily Nation, the main headline has to do with education. And this comes from the proposed education reforms as recommended by the Presidential Working Party on education reforms, forced NYS-style drill for students, mandatory 3 months community service after senior school, as well as 9 months upon completion of university and college. And this will be a requirement for graduates before securing employment. This is not the first time we're seeing something like this. In the 80s, there was a whole National Youth Service, which was mandatory before anyone joined university. But it is interesting that we are talking about education at this time, this point in time, because up until now, it was matters politics, day in, day out, top headline. Over the past 2-3 weeks, we've been talking more and more about education matters. Yes, of course, because of university placement that COOPS released last week on Monday, and immediately after that, the report that was handed to the president on the far-reaching reforms as proposed by the Presidential Working Party on CBC and the whole education curriculum. But more concerning for us is the fact that over 500,000 Kenyans who would have qualified for placement in universities and tertiary institutions are not interested at all in applying for even these positions. Let's start with you, Faris. Yes. Mount Kenya, let me just get it right. Mount Kenya Colleges, Universities, Students Association Chairperson. You would understand this better than anyone else.
Sure.
What is happening to people? Why are people no longer interested in joining universities or other tertiary institutions?
Thank you so much, Fred. Let me say I'm grateful to be here. And as you have said, I'm the national chairman at MCUSA. And probably what we have here is the continuation of probably some of the problems that have been coming all the way from previously. And the reason why probably you see a lot of people, a lot of students don't even want to apply for these is because remember that earlier this year, there was that recommendation that school fees was supposed to be hiked. And at some point, it actually happened from 16,000 to 52,000. Then there was a lot of uproar from students. I remember at MCUSA we were part of those deliberations. And we raised our voice, we agitated a lot. At some point we did even a letter to the ministry and told them that the students cannot add anything to what they are giving right now. It's already a mess because even some of our students are sleeping hungry. So for you to hike school fees and tell them that they have to dig deep in their pockets, then you're not being fair to them. And probably, Fred, this is now the disheartening message that got to the students, because you can see even the COOPs, they have put the cost of the courses. And when you look at it, you can actually tell that most of the students who come from humble backgrounds are not going to afford that. Because, for example, let me take an engineering course in any university. It's going for around 300,000 per year. So when you look at that, Fred, and probably you are being told, now here are your results, apply for university. And you can remember very well that probably even raising your school fees in secondary school was a problem. So you are not going to attempt this because you can clearly tell that your parents cannot afford.
Okay. Maliba,
so that is the problem we are having.
Let's come to you. And is it purely an issue of cost? Because yes, there's an introduction or rather proposal. This one has actually taken effect. The fact that it is cost-specific fees for every degree that you pursue. But yet, it is when it's being effected. Do you think that the information was already on the ground and people decided, no, education is too expensive, we're not even going to apply?
I think one of those things that we've not done over time has been matching the cost of education, especially for those who go for higher education. Parents who've actually been taking their children to, or rather their young ones to intermediate colleges, actually were paying much more than guys who are going to university. People who went to technical colleges, people who've gone to probably Kenya Institute of Mass Communication, I'm just talking about the intermediate colleges, they were paying much more, including guys who were at the medical training college. So over time, we've not really reviewed this cost, but then the cost of administering those courses is quite high. One of those things as an indicator is to show that we really have tried to subsidize that is the kind of debts that universities now have. We talk about it as if it's just a passing. How does that occur? It occurs that we have to pay lecturers, we have to buy facilities, we have to run universities at market rates. But then, of course, we have subsidized that as a nation. It was in good interest because it was for the interest of the nation, or rather providing what people in public policy would call a public good. You know, for young people, they are generally, when people are coming up, there are four things that they really need. Access to education, skills development and training. That is, every young person is looking forward to that, because at the marketplace, there are only two things you can sell. You're either selling your services, which is either skills, you're here actually selling to TV47 a skill service, or goods. A lot of young people are not in the production sector. They don't control, they don't own land, they don't own factories. So a lot of times they show up at the marketplace with only skills. So that for a lot of young people is a priority. The other thing is, of course, access to market for those who have got both a service and a product. It's still a challenge for our young people. And then, of course, access to credit has been a challenge, and then technological transfer. We still have got instances where a lot of what I would call expatriates are doing things which locals could do. Even at industrial area level, you will actually find that probably somebody from Asia is the one who knows how to mix the wax that makes the matchstick. And then the Africans will only be bringing in the wooden part of it and fixing the two of it. Things that could be done if we had a technological transfer. But be that as it is, the cost of education in this country, at least as has been at university level, talking about publicly funded universities, has been way subsidized. So the effect has been that universities are struggling to cope up, provide quality education, and still be able to operate and break even. And then as a country, we are not able to continue, for example, taking care of these particular costs. You see that in our budget for as long as I've known the budget, the education budget has been the biggest. I think today we're talking about almost
76
billion.
billion.
That is the biggest budget we have. So even as a country, we've really tried to prioritize that. While we do that, we've really left other sectors that we should actually be putting a lot of money, for example, uncovered. For example, we are supposed to put up to 11% of our national budgets on agriculture. We've not done that. So this is a conversation that is a difficult one to have, but it's quite necessary. Because whatever way you look at the costs, there is no way a university today, both private and public, are going to actually do some of the courses they're actually offering. Currently, at the 50,000 shillings that all of us paid when we were still young, we're talking about 50, all inclusive.
Yes.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
Because
it's not
that money,
yes.
that money is not even possible for so many secondary schools today to sustain a child without the government subsidy.
But what's the effect on universities? The fact that out of 886,000 who qualified for placement, almost 2/3 did not apply for that. What's the effect on universities? Even the fact that now they have a smaller pool to actually get students from.
I think one of the effects on the universities, Fred, is that one, there will be, of course, low income on the side of the universities.
Yes.
Remember, our universities are almost all of them, they are running on debts. You can remember there was a problem in Egerton University, it almost closed down. There was a problem with in Moi University, it almost closed down. So those are some of the challenges. But probably if we can check and see probably where the problem is, Fred, you will understand even some of the leaders who are supposed actually to be encouraging those young people who are coming from secondary schools to probably get or acquire university education. Some of their talks are also not very encouraging, because when you hear the deputy president, and this is the second highest office in the land, going to address new graduates and telling them that even if you get these papers, there are no jobs. And that is
the reality.
It's true. And I totally agree with you. But then again, what is the essence of the government if it's not about to caution its young people?
Okay. And joining us on the panel this morning is the Honorable John Mutunga, MP Tigania West. Good to have you in studio with us. Karibu sana. You found us discussing matters education. It is what features on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. And we are yet to get to this, the issue of community service that will be mandatory going forward. We're still on the story that's featured on the front page of the Standard, where close to 600,000 students who sat for KCSE last year did not opt for placement to universities or colleges. For some, the cost was prohibitive, but for others, it was out of ignorance. And we're just discussing about the cost issue. There's, of course, the introduction of cost-specific fees, which is much higher for different degree courses. Previously, it was uniform across board. Now, but is it just an issue of the cost of funding university education? Or is there another problem that we're not seeing? The fact that almost 2/3 of young people who would have qualified for universities and colleges are not interested in this?
Cost is an important element in the choice of a course at the university. But by and large, students have also been looking at placement, job placement after the university. Technical colleges have been, students, graduates from technical colleges have been more advantaged in the recent past than a lot more of the university students because of the nature of the training. Kenya at this point of development requires a lot more of technicians than the professionals, the managers and others. So the choice has also been informed in that. I've experienced of students from my constituency seeking for placement in the medical colleges especially, like for instance, to do courses on instead of going for medicine, they go to they become medical practitioners at a diploma level, and others go for lab technician, and so on. So they prefer such because it is easier to get a job. What is important in this country right now for young people is where do I get a job? And they still know that you can go back to the university and advance your course even as you do your job.
So what I'm hearing from you, because according to the front page of the Standard, it could be out of ignorance, but from what I understand from you is that it's actually out of information, and they actually understand why they don't want to.
If you see what happened in the recent past, first of all, there was the IT, wave, where everybody thought, if I do an ITC course, I'll get a job quite fast. Many students applied for IT. Then there was the issue of procurement, the Kabura issue and others. And the students also thought that if I go for procurement, I will get a job faster or I'll get rich faster. So most of these things are guided a lot more on where do I go after this? And do I have possibilities of furthering my education still? Okay. Because if you are young and progressive, you can still do your education. Even if you don't do your start with a degree.
Maliba, then this is actually promising and positive. If actually the Kenyan student or Kenyan learner really understands what they need, and therefore they can actually make a decision, I will not go for a university degree right now, I'll pursue something else.
Actually, in the first place, we do not have sufficient slots at the university level. All our universities put together cannot take in more than, we're talking about degree level, cannot take in more than 300,000 students. So the number there, of course, is cumulative of people who will actually have qualified to go to colleges. But then the university education, also, like Mheshimiwa has said, I like to say that as a country, we degreenized the country. And the in thing and everything. Today, a nurse can go to the US and get a job much easier than an engineer. Yet, as a country, we've really put up there. Even though I really think that a number of these proposals, including what is actually making the headlines, will actually have to be tested, or rather be justified.
You're talking because about the specific fees?
No, I'm talking about the proposals in the Working Party.
Yes. Okay.
A number of them are not really new things, including the NYS-style training has actually been proposed over time, but then there's a reason why we stopped doing that. 2, you cannot then reform an entire education system by a simple report from a Working Party. Every one of the proposals made here has to go back to proper research. How do you implement a plan? By further planning. So I do not necessarily think it's easy. Of course, for purposes of making headlines, this is an easy pick, and then of course it's a hook upon which you hang on a story. But there's quite a number of things, because the future of work is such that qualifications come secondary to competence. That is why, as a country, at elementary level, we went the CBC way, the competence-based curriculum way, and then at training level, upper training, we went the CBET way. So today, literally at the education, so CBC doesn't just apply to guys at the bottom. There is a CBC upper version that is called CBET. We don't talk about it so much because the people who do a lot of talking, especially on X and Facebook, are people who are millennials and they still have got children who are doing CBC. Okay. So they don't pronounce themselves so much about CBET. And then, of course, as a practice, parents almost become hands-off once their children go to college, because sometimes they're in the fields that you probably do not say so much. So it's a good point to have a conversation about the report as given is a good starting point for the conversation on our education. We need to talk about the future of work. We need to talk about the fact that already corporations are looking at competence first. Today, bigger corporations, including Microsoft, Google, you go in and first of all, they give you a series of tasks. If you can actually handle that, then they look at your papers secondarily. A lot of organizations I know today, if you're going in for somebody who's doing coding, they will really be interested to engage somebody on coding if that particular person is self-taught and not necessarily one who went to school. So the future of work in and of itself actually demands that we review. A lot of things are going to go away. Automation is coming in. There's, we call it the 4th industrial revolution. Even as a country, we need to prepare for that. The biggest problem has been that even as China and Asia becomes affluent and manufacturing, the world's factory is supposed to move to Africa now, we are not priming ourselves. He spoke about technical colleges. In the process of degreenizing the country and celebrating degrees and everybody rushing towards that particular direction, we killed middle-level colleges. We did away with a lot of technical colleges. And today, for example, to realize Vision 2030, we need about 5,000 more engineers. But every one of that engineer needs about 25 technical people to work with. There is no enough number of people at that particular level. Some of the requests we are getting from the countries in the Gulf are people who are supposed to do technical work. Qatar, Saudi Arabia and elsewhere have actually been capturing all these technical people, and we are left without any. So they are paying well. I know for purposes of politics, because somehow in this country we ended up putting politics at the apex. So when we started asking politicians for degrees, then everybody is wondering, however much I could actually do well as a medical person, if one day I want to run for office, then this degree thing is everything we are celebrating. Then I'm looked upon as less educated.
Okay.
That is the biggest problem. So it's about a mentality. I also know that we have put in a lot of money into the TVET sector. One of those things that we've not done has been to change the mentality. Because somehow people are looking at the TVET sector with, it's not as glamorous, and that is where we get it wrong. I remember the late Steve Jobs talking and saying, the only reason why they are manufacturing in China today is not because it's necessarily cheap to manufacture in China. It is because in the US, you're not going to have a lot of people who are trained in technical work of actually coming up with the phones and everything else. In the US, he said, you will struggle to even fill a football stadium.
Okay.
In China, there is a glut of people who can do technical work. In Germany, for example, they have got what they call a dual system, that you are doing the academia and you also train at the same time. You will be surprised that in Germany, somebody would rather know how to work out a car. Yet, remember in Germany, education is free, from elementary all the way to a PhD if you are able to. Yet, a lot of them would favor, first of all, to go the technical way. And it makes sense. 60% of the German economy, for example, is by SMEs. Those SMEs are not just very small. Some of them are world leaders in their sectors. So even as we think about industrializing, as a country we made a leap and of course got into the service sector, but it's not enough. It's not as robust and wide enough to bring in the many people we really want to hire. Now, we've got a glut of young people out here. 600,000 in colleges and universities at any particular time. 1 million of them coming out of school at different levels. But where do we put them? The informal sector overtook the formal sector in 1992 as the official leading jobs creator. We are not preparing these guys for jobs. And here we are, so we have to think about these things. One of those problems I have in Dimuli with the Working Party's report is that we have gone back to regurgitating these things. Like, for example, I know that a good citizen has got 3 characteristics, that you must be either in school or at work, unless you are old or too young or sick. Number 2 is that every good citizen must pay their taxes. And number 3, a good citizen must actually do community service. But then how is it that community service at pre-college would be the most important one? You would
Hold that thought there, because
we'll
come back after the breaker to take a look at now the community service that's proposed, and it's featuring on the front page of the Daily Nation. You're watching Morning Cafe. I'm still here with my panelists, Faris Jain, Maliba Arnold, and the Honorable John Mutunga, MP Tigania West, discussing matters education before we delve into the politics that I know you were waiting for. You're watching Morning Cafe. Peter Ganya West, Maliba Arnold, Public Policy Analyst, and Faris Jain, the National Chairman, MKUSA. And MKUSA is the Mount Kenya Colleges and Universities Students Association. And we'll start with you, Faris, because we've been talking about matters education. Yes. We've dealt so much into the funding and how expensive university education is. That is definitely a conversation that will continue, because even the issue of government investment in CBC also comes into question. Let's now take a look at other proposals that have been featured in that recommendation by the Presidential Working Party. And it is what the Daily Nation today is calling forced NYS-style drill for students, a headline that I'm a bit uncomfortable with, and because what they're talking about is a mandatory 3 months community service. Probably mandatory is what they're equating to being forced, but this 3 months community service after senior school, as well as 9 months upon completion of university and college, will be required. But this is still a proposal. If at all it's implemented, then we'll get to understand it better. Don't you think that probably this is something necessary for the current crop of graduates, either joining learners, either joining universities, or graduates who are leaving university towards employment?
Fred, while I agree that it's important for these skills to be installed in some of these secondary school students who are coming out, I also think that putting it as a mandatory kind of a training is going to make some of them shun away from this, even probably getting into the university. Because when you put some of this training, and I like Maliba's argument that this kind of NYS style of training is normally in countries where they are at war. But right now what we need in our country is to think how we can grow the economy. And it's so sad that actually even in the universities, when you go in there, you go take a course in engineering, but you are not actually equipped with entrepreneurship skills, which is quite important in our country today. We have already agreed that there are no jobs enough for these guys who are coming out of the universities and colleges. Then why would we prioritize NYS kind of training? Well, we can actually opt for to probably get them some skills that would actually help them to start their own businesses. Because I do believe that that is what is important right now. If they put these things as mandatory, and I quite agree that some of these students, they actually need probably to be taught about community service. But then again, is it what we need right now as a country?
Okay, the Honorable Mutunga, there must be something that we can gain from community service. It is not military training. Surely there's the issue of discipline, the issue of service to community as well. How do you interact with your neighbors, the members of the community? Do you even understand the kind of problems that your community faces? Definitely there's a disconnect between the current student and issues that actually affect the country.
Stanley, I went through the NYS training, and that time we did not gain a lot other than the paramilitary training. And it was basically thought that before students go to university, if exposed to national youth service training, which is paramilitary, they would be more disciplined. It was purely to discipline us. Well, I don't know whether we got better discipline, but we made a few more friends, and we also, had physical exercise, so we were better.
You benefited from it.
We benefited from that. But in this particular case, first of all, I see it as a huge investment, getting all the 1 million or so graduate post-secondary graduates to paramilitary training, because I hope it's not only those who are going to university that are supposed to be targeted, because even the other Kenyans will also find a way into some job somewhere and help in the nation building. There is also the issue of, the issue of the cost initially, the management of the entire process. But there are some benefits I see very clearly. Number one, some of these children have not been exposed to the life. They really don't know what real life is. You find a kid thinks that chicken can only be gotten from supermarkets, and then they imagine that everything is just done around the house and around the shops and so on. They have lived in buildings. They need to, get in touch with that. So placement is key. You need to know which child to take where. On the other hand, there is the issue of Kenyanization. This is the time, basically, we bring them together, build, bigger partnerships, bigger friendships, open up to, people from different areas. And in the mix, we need to be very careful how we do it, in the management aspect of it, so that we can get children from more less advantaged schools. And I like the fact that the report tries to do away with the national schools and brings back to standardizes all schools, because every school should be a standard school for every Kenyan student. Every child should be able to benefit. Now, besides exposure to reality, there's that issue of building a new Kenya, the Kenya community. If you look at our children, they don't even have a language. Actually, those who live in urban centers, they don't have a language. Their friends are just anybody who is near, who has interacted with them somehow in life. And they are able to Kenyanize very well. We don't have this, I come from here and I have to behave like people who come from wherever it is. And the final one is improving on their ability to serve, the willingness for a child to serve. Today's children are very conservative. They really want to do very little. They want to remain in their circles. They want to spend very little energy. They do not want to go out and serve. In the past, when you visited our home, it is the kids who served you. Today, it is the parents or the house help, but the kids will just be seated, relaxing, enjoying their time. So it's time to have our children also be agile and wake up to the reality that people are human. I mean, humans are social. They are social beings, so they need to really be learned from very early ages that they are going into a life of service, because the life of service is longer than any other life. School life, notwithstanding, but the life of service is a lot longer, because you start serving from around age, let's say 24 when you finish your degree, to around 60. Okay. Those are many years.
And of course, the issue of community service has already been practiced by some universities, private universities, and even Strathmore, for example, I've seen examples.
Actually, even Starehe Boys Center is a classical example of community service institution. And many, even private schools are borrowed that example. They expose their children to, they tell them, okay, you must give us a plan of how you're going to spend your vacation. Which institutions you go to, so that we write to those institutions and introduce you formally, and then you can be received and given assignments. And some of them have done better. Of course, those who do not want to serve always give you false reports. But Strathmore, yes, and Starehe Boys Center is a classical example. There's a lot to learn from Starehe Boys Center, although it also has the other side. Okay. It's possible to expose students to things that are not necessarily very good when you allow them to go so early into community service.
Maliba, you're the one who started this conversation about this just before the break, and I know I stopped you midway, as you executed a point. Go ahead.
Looking at how we, Fred, you'll allow me to just a little bit deviate, and then I'll be back to that, hopefully, so that I don't lose my train of thought. But I'm also thinking that as a country, we are very experimentalist in nature. We've done that in politics a lot of times, where in this country, a party that wins elections is one that is less than 5 years. In other jurisdictions, that is unheard of. It's impossible to start off a party, just like it's not easy to start up a company today and you make a breakthrough tomorrow. But in this country, we are quite experimentalist. So we've been doing a little bit of reviews here and there. Some are abandoned midway. So you will see that we've not, for example, dealt with the initial report that gave birth to the CBC and the CBET. The same report that worked around the new TVET, including bringing up the TVET authority. And we put in a lot of money, about 30 billion shillings in the last 10 years were put into trying to restructure the TVET. So way before we do that, of course, then there's the CBC, and then there's a little bit of noise online. And out of political initiative, we are coming up already with other proposals that, if not well managed, could be rushed into implementation. Then we have things that are mixed up. This one, for an education system, it has to take time. It has to mature. Systems have to mature. So on that particular bit, I am just hoping that with a little bit of noise and now what is here and our experimentalist nature, we will not rush into then again once more confusing the system instead of maturing it. We really need to mature it because it's already been working for us. CBC has not even been anchored properly. Now we already are coming in with newer proposals. So we are doing this at a time when we have not even built the junior secondary schools to completion. We've not seen the first product of that particular end. So it's not yet even mature for review at this particular point. I hope that we will not rush with this. It was the President's Working Party to give him an opinion on how the ground felt. I still hold it that that particular committee or working party was not all-inclusive. it had very little generation, Gen Zers, for example. But the people we are working for, remember, are the alpha generation. The people who we really are going to force this on to are people born after 2013.
Are you saying there's a disconnect between those who came up with the report and the reality on the ground?
If you look at the team exclusively, it was the Generation Y people. People born, sometimes they ended, we can actually put a cut-off in 1980. There were very few millennials in it. And you know, millennials have lived through it. These ones have lived through, it's a very dynamic generational cohort. So it was quite the traditional guys in the academy. People in the industry didn't have so much a say on this. Of course, we brought in people from the religious sector, a good thing as well. And of course, the traditional people who've been around this. So I still feel that this particular report should not be rushed. We need to ruminate over it and think, so that then over time, when we make a policy proposal and decision out of it, it's really been thought out very well, including being researched properly. Otherwise, if we are going to rush with these ones, this is now CBC 2.0. We are not yet even done with CBC 1.0. We've really not worked it out, and now we are bringing in this. So a number of these things are a little bit of additives. It feels like it's just spicing it up, but some of them could... The problem with the policy overlays is that sometimes what is incidental to the main thing can actually end up being the main thing.
Like, you lose the plot.
You lose the plot. Like you bring in NYS, you are supposed to quote unquote discipline, the population, and even as you do the disciplining, what happens then? What happens after that is that you then end up coming up with a military grade population, where if there is a grievance, it takes 2 weeks to convert, because for you to come up with a militia, they just need to know how to march, to communicate. If they can move, they can communicate, and they can shoot. You're okay. Now you already have got people who already are regimented. So how do you work out that? Okay. So from this particular bit where I see we are proposing NYS style, you know, at elementary level, I still have a problem
with that, because community service does not even have to be in groups. You could actually do it as an individual.
The mandatory level bit of it is what I think. At an elementary level, a lot of what we're trying to achieve is just to teach young people numeracy, literacy, life skills.
On that issue of life skills especially, community service, that's where it comes in especially.
It's already actually taken care of within the CBC framework. But then at advanced level, there are only two ways of education. How are you educating a mind? You're educating it either by acquiring old knowledge. That is what we do at the basic degree level, or if you're doing a diploma. We are taking in old knowledge. And then by the time you go to do a master's, you are expected to produce new knowledge. So you learn at that advanced level in two ways, that you are either taking in old knowledge or you're producing new knowledge. You study by producing new knowledge. So some of these things we are doing here. And then when we are trying to apply whatever we have learned, it's two ways. You are doing it either the internship style, and it's at the internship level where you can bring in the issue of community service.
Which I think is more or less the format that they're taking, because 3 months immediately after high school, fine, you're not in college yet, but and this one you don't have to do it in groups. I think it's more or less like internship.
But then what kind of internship, a specialized internship, at least something that will actually teach you serious community service? Sweeping the streets, living with people, the way Sarai Boys does for their boys during holidays, it does not, in my opinion, it starts to inculcate the spirit, yes, but it's not so intensive. So if, for example, you are a doctor and you are expected to serve free of charge for 1 year, it will teach you. Lawyers have got even points on free service, for example, if you're going to do pro bono service. So I still feel that we can actually bring it at that level, because then at the higher level, there are two ways of looking at then training, besides bringing in, taking in all knowledge and of course producing new knowledge, is that you're either doing it by internship or you're doing it by what we used to call apprenticeship.
Okay.
So from that particular end, I still think that this proposal is good, but it can be infused in our internship program, because today it is impossible to have internship a lot of us go to internship just because it's a requirement to graduate.
Okay.
Yet, that's why a lot of people will tell you that you are going to have an intern who just walks around because he's not being paid. If it's not a paid internship, that is not internship. And we are complaining about it continuously. So I think we could find a way of now when somebody is an adult who can actually understand some of these concepts.
Okay.
And we are telling you, you have no option around this. You can work around that.
I want us to move away from that issue. Of course, this is going to be one big talking point. The proposal to actually introduce a mandatory 3 months community service after senior school and 9 months after completion of university or college for all graduates. That is a proposal. We still wait for its implementation. I want us to move to the politics as well, gentlemen. It also features on the front pages of the dailies today. It is one of the stories on the Daily Nation. Ruto Raila rule out power sharing ahead of crucial talks, and on the Standard, it is the main headline, Ruto maintains tough conditions ahead of talks. The fact that we're seeing us substituting politics for matters education today means that even the national psyche has moved on from political discussions. Yet, as from tomorrow, we're going to see this gentleman and a few ladies who are part of the team of 10 sitting around a table, and I think the proposal is that they will do so at Bomas of Kenya, according to the cartoon on the Standard. But the feeling is that, Faris, and we could start with you, that we seem to have moved on from this discussion about possible dialogue and talks. Kenyans have moved on from this. Do you think, or do you feel that there's still necessity for this dialogue to continue, or do you even feel that it's going to be consequential if at all it happens?
Thank you so much, Fred. I would like to say that, one, I feel that it's very, very important for us to have this dialogue, because we can't be having people in the streets. Probably you have seen what has happened. We have lost a lot of people, a lot of young people actually, because these are not old people. So it's very, very important for us to probably find ways to solve this impasse. But then again, we also have to actually think through. If this dialogue is going to happen, Fred, let it not be about just two gentlemen. Let it not be just about the president and the former prime minister, because it must involve all of us. For example, there are a lot of issues that the two sides have come to the table with. Of course, Kenya Kwanza is saying that they have agreed that we are going to do this within the confines of the Constitution. And I don't know why they are so much obsessed with saying that Honorable Raila Odinga wants a share of the government. He has said time and again that he is not interested. He doesn't want to share anything in this government. And it seems that yesterday the president agreed on that. But then when you listen to the person who has been given that mandate from Kenya Kwanza to be the chair and to lead these talks, you can still feel that kind of energy. You're talking about the majority leader? Yes, yes. You can still feel that there is that kind of energy, whereby when he was talking yesterday to the people of Nyeri, he told them that he is not going to agree on power sharing. Yet, the Honorable Raila Odinga has come on the table and said, I don't want to partake anything in this government. I just want us to probe some few things. And by the way, Fred, this dialogue will open up a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Today in the papers, you have seen the Auditor General saying that there could be a possible breach in the information, in the access of the information at IBC. Mm-hmm. So, and you remember very well that Honorable Raila Odinga has been saying that the 2022 election might have, it could have been interfered by external forces. So probably this is one of the things that is going to be looked at. But when I look at it, because Fred, I come from Mount Kenya, and most of these students we are talking about, it's most of them, those who won't go to school, they come from Mount Kenya. Mm-hmm. We are asking as people from Mount Kenya, if we are going to have this dialogue, are we not entitled probably to bring our issues on the table? Because one, Fred, I do agree that Honorable President William Ruto, Honorable Raila Odinga, they have sent out their teams. So basically, they are going to discuss their issues. But then again, what about a person coming from Mount Kenya? Because we still have issues that we want solved. And if you ask me, this dialogue should be done in what now we call a constitutional conference, whereby we all come together, because they have insisted that these issues are about the Kenyan people. Then let it be about the Kenyan people. We want to come on the table as Mount Kenya people and say that we want fair representation, we want just distribution of resources. Because when we have fair representation, Fred, then that will guarantee that the member of parliament from Roiro does not represent 450,000 people in the parliament, while the member of parliament for Fafi is representing 15,000. There is no fairness in that.
Okay.
When we talk about the just distribution of resources, we can't be having people going to apply for bursary in Roiro again, and somebody dies. And it's not even the issuing of the bursary, it's collecting the forms, the bursary application forms.
Because of the high number of people.
Yes, yes, okay. Because we don't have just distribution of resources. So if we are going to have this dialogue, Fred, let it be a constitutional conference, let all Kenyans come on the table.
Okay, but the feeling is that, Honorable Mutunga, that the kind of sentiments that Faris here expresses about the expectation from this dialogue, that's not the reality. Listening to politicians speaking on different fora, you can actually tell that they're least interested in discussing anything directly to do with Mwananchi. You look at the raft of the list of agenda that talking about, even Kenya Kwanza itself, reconstitution of the IBC, very little to do with Mwananchi. Implementation of 2/3 gender rule, probably in parliament, entrenchment of the CDF, office of the leader of opposition, office of the prime cabinet secretary, very little. It's more about the politicians. But even the feeling is that even those going to the table are reluctant to even engage. Do you think that we still need, that it will be consequential for the Mwananchi, for Faris here, who already has enough issues that would want to be canvassed on the table?
Stanley, I want to say one thing. We have a nation and a country, and in our country there are a lot of things that need to be done. Very many things need to be done, and you can't do everything through discussion. There are institutions that are charged with responsibilities of dealing out some of those things. But in this particular issue, in this particular formation, we are talking about the issues that have been antagonistic in nature in view of the opposition and the people and the government. And the government has got its own side. There are several issues that need to be fixed for the government to run smoothly. The opposition has got its own package. Remember, in the initial list, the cost of living was not there. But now it appears as the topmost priority when it comes to the opposition, because there was an agreement. Before the agreement to sit down and discuss these issues, there was an agreement on the agenda. Now, when I look at the two issues, the two sets of issues, the first, when you look at Raila Odinga's side, cost of living. Yes, we say it is about Mwananchi. It's about every Kenyan. Cost of living is not only peculiar to Kenya, cost of living is high across the globe. We are talking about the global econometrics. Now, let's go back to audit of 2022 election. How does it help the common Mwananchi? IMBC is common in both cases. IMBC is an issue because it has been a contentious issue every time. Whenever we have an election, IMBC is blamed. IMBC did not do this, IMBC didn't do the other. And my friend from the Faris has said something that I would like to follow up a little bit. He says there may be some evidence or some imagination that elections were interfered with. And we're looking at a system where we had the strong person fighting the weak person. Unfortunately, the weaker person won the election. So in this case, where can we find unfairness? There is a whole total government and government support to a process of electioneering on the side of Azimio. There was total, I was part of that election myself. I was in the last government, in the last parliament, and we suffered for 4 years without a single development project in our neighborhood, without a single recognition in any government office because of the handshake. And we are the ones who put this government in place. Now, there was no possibility for William Ruto to influence the elections. He only relied on God and people. That's it. There can never be any fair election like last year's election. There can't be in this country. Okay. Let me be very honest with you. The government had a lot of money, the government had a lot of influence, and they rained on us. By government, you mean the previous? I mean the Azimio, and you know, the chairman of Azimio was the president of Kenya. The president of Kenya had all the means to influence the election. So, the other issue about what I want to bring about, when you look at the side of, before I come to inclusivity, IEBC, I say this common, 2,000 gender rule has been an issue for a very long time. Since we've been discussing about gender, about empowerment, empowering the girl child until we have over-empowered the girl child at the expense of the boy child. I think it's time we remember the boy child. Now, the CDF is about people. CDF does not do development anywhere. It doesn't do development in space. It does development in the villages. And the impact of CDF is a lot more pronounced than the impact of the county governments, and they are getting billions. So we are saying entrenchment of CDF in the Constitution is important, so that we are not in court every time. And then the issue of the leader of the official leader of majority or minority. Of opposition. Of opposition. Yeah. Okay, let me say opposition. That's how they are naming. For purposes of records. We need to think through this because there's a lot of confusion. And there is some feeling that we are not represented in this government, that we don't become part and parcel of this government. Because once they give an official leader of minority, they don't trust that the official leader of minority is good enough. Because there is somebody probably in the government who is higher. But this is a proposal by the president himself in his memorandum to Parliament. I want you to realize where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the opposition side, because they don't feel like the official leader of the official leader of opposition, which is the minority leader, is strong enough. That is why you see, once we say all these issues can be sorted out in Parliament, they say no. We need the outsiders. And when you look at the outsiders, who comes in? Carlos Mosioka is there. So they feel like there is somebody there should be a link between Stanley, an opposition leader, a presidential candidate who loses an election. The immediate loss of an election, number 2, becomes nothing in Kenya, as per the Constitution. That's a complete constitutional, it's an oversight. We needed to contextualize this in the sense that this person still is very important. Raila Odinga had 200,000 votes less than William Ruto. So he just goes into oblivion with all his voters, all that number. So there is need for recognition, and they feel that they must have a hand in the management of the state, in the interpretation of how the government should be opposed. Okay. So they don't trust the person they are put there as the end of the leader of minority as the official leader of opposition. And that is why, in the interpretation of the Kenya Kwanza government, these people have a problem with their representation. So let us give them an opposition. You're giving them a solution. Yeah, a solution to their problem. Then the final issue, of course, this other one. Before I come, you need to give me time to talk about it. I'll come back to that because you need to wait. The issue of inclusivity. Let me talk about the inclusivity. When you see inclusivity coming in, it depends on the definition. What is inclusivity? Going back to what he's saying, Raila Odinga says, okay, we don't want to be in government. The last few days he has said that. He never said that from the beginning. The issue has been never said he wants to be in government either. Exactly. No, he knows negotiation, discussions, negotiation leading to. And if you don't negotiate with us and discuss with us, we go to the streets. Okay, let's bring it. Let me just have a rebut. Okay, 30 seconds just to rebut, and then I'll come back to you. Yes, probably. I would want to remind Mheshimiwa here that he has said that Ruto was a weak candidate, but he was not a weak candidate. Every opportunity he got, Ruto had was weak. Okay. Every chance that the deputy president got back then, he reminded us that he is the deputy president of Kenya and he knew what he was doing. Okay. Fred, if you look at how Honorable Ruto conducted his campaigns, he actually reminded us every point he got that he is the deputy president of Kenya. And Raila Odinga was not in the government because I don't remember any position that he was given. Okay. I remember the former president Uhuru Kenyatta saying that, and it's true, but remind me who was fired. Okay. Mheshimiwa, remind me who was fired.
so that Raila Odinga's people could come on board.
I want us to focus much more.
You see what I need to remind Faris is that there is what is de jure and there is what is de facto. De jure, Raila did not hold any position.
No.
De facto, he actually was a co-president. He would determine policy. His people were hired into office. We brought in the concept of big government for out of the handshake. But then the good thing is that even
Maliba,
for people
I
who
would
are
just like you to probably...
I just wanted to remind you that even as you speak about how you define what is in government, too, first I'll take you probably, you and I were probably young in 1987. In 1997, President Moi started a practice that we need to break a cycle of. President Moi, knowing that his government was weak, approached Raila Odinga and brought him. That is the first time we hear of the word merger, because the first time we had heard of it was during the Kadu and Kanu. As a nation in between here, of course, we forgot about that. So what started with Moi strengthening his government, and this has nothing to do with the person of Raila Odinga, but I will call it, for purposes of illustration, I'll call it the Raila exception, which essentially is actually a constitutional waiver. That every time we have a law, we give ourselves laws and systems. If the outcome does not please us, we change. So in 1997, we had even the IPPG process. A lot of times I hear Raila Odinga speak about the IPPG process, but we forget that the merger in and of itself at that particular time violated it. A little bit, it was a waiver over what had been said at that particular point. Given the law is made for man, man is not made for law. So then the same attempt was done in 2002. This time, subtly, by bringing in an MOU. We only knew there was an MOU when there was a fallout. That was also an attempt at subverting the order that existed. Not subverting it in a bad way, but at least trying to ensure that we change the law as is. Because when we were voting in for NAC, all of us were voting in for one government. But then behind scenes, there was an MOU. That again was another attempt at a waiver. But then what would that lead to? It led us to 205. If you look at the Constitution 2010 and the Bomas draft, in material, the difference is very minimal. Not, as a little bit of nuances. Of course, there are a few changes here, the presidential system and such, but the material substance is not different. So what really made the Bomas draft to actually go down and take in water? It was about an attempt at having what I call a Raila exception, a waiver. He didn't start it. It's Moi who started it. But then he has perfected it. And why I'm actually calling it a Raila exception and a constitutional waiver is that it's going to outlive him. Because what stops you tomorrow when I beat you in a presidential election from also pushing the same? And he never says he wants government at that particular point. He never says. But the results, all of us know where the results lead to. And I'll demonstrate that even as I move on. So in 2002, there is the attempt at that. It fails. The consequences are the Bomas draft going down, the polarization of a nation that led us to the 2007, 2008, because it was built up. People did not believe that a president who had lost a referendum could win an election. The nation was polarized. And that is what led to the 2007 and 2008 in per se. You know what happened after that. Then we did away with the whole constitution, build up a new block and called it the National Accord, an appendage that was brought into the constitution to bring in that mongrel that we called the Nusumkate government. Move forward in 2013, the CORD government, or rather the CORD arm, assailed government for 5 years when it was impossible to do that. In 2018, President Uhuru Kenyatta then decides, okay, this is too much. The one thing I want you to remember is that President Moi had a handshake. We only change names. It's a handshake, it's a merger, it's a coalition, it's a national accord, whatever you want to call it. Had it in his last term. Kibaki tried that in 2002 with that MOU thing and it didn't work. That is how we ended up with 2007. Then Kibaki has it in his last term. Uhuru Kenyatta also had it in his last term. So even as we get around here, there are two things that we are trying to conflate here are the terms mediation. You've heard them talk about mediation.
So if I get it right, Maliba, you're saying that any possible talks, the ones that are to start tomorrow, will definitely end up in a situation.
I actually was going to that. It's easy, if it works like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's definitely a duck. So how did the 2018 process end up having a handshake that created the mongrel that we had? It killed oversight. It actually, at the end of the day, the good thing is that the courts fought back with the BBI attempt at mutilating the constitution as it were and creating a big government. But let me just go to, or rather prosecute the point I was trying to bring home on the points here. If you are here, when Azimio started the issue of complaining, they didn't start today. We are having the need for dialogue today because we had an election last year that the Raila side lost. If we didn't have that, we would not need dialogue. There were continuous attempts at pushing people to go to the streets immediately after elections. The people resisted. Because somehow, in 2017, Raila went to court, and the court made a ruling. What did Chebukati do? As a seasoned lawyer, he turned the court ruling into a tool. So he ticked against everything the court said, so that in case he goes back to court, it will be easy to say, you guys said that we should do this. We did this. What is wrong? The issue of opening the servers and auditing the servers, that's where I wanted to come to. When you're talking about auditing election, so what? You see, you speak about national dialogue. The highest level of national dialogue is elections. The people speak. We give ourselves almost 6 months to actually have a conversation. In that particular process, we elect 1,882 people. Somehow, all the other seats, 1,880 were okay. The only problem we have had continuously is on one seat. I actually even had Mheshimiwa speaking about that it was an oversight to allow somebody who has lost with a little margin to sit out there. He won an election, right? Yeah. He probably, and his is what we call the first past the post election. Whether if he wins even with 1 vote, he's a member of parliament. Yeah. Do you have an assistant member of parliament where you come from?
None.
So if we start with that culture, this is a system we give ourselves, and we voted for it, 67% of us. So if we're going to talk about that, so the people spoke during the election in the ballot. Those who did not like it went to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. Okay. It was prosecuted at that level, and the court upheld that particular process. If we open up this process that we want to audit it, what are we doing? So that what? And the issue of the server, Fred, is a moving target. Initially, we are talking about open the servers, as if they are closed. No one has produced even a single Form 34A, one. And remember, we are a country that you can't do anything hiding. Mm-hmm. One that is different from what is. And you remember the Supreme Court asking, now, and I think it was Lenaola asking that, you know, Form 34As, first of all, at the polling station, agents take photos. So the physical one is what Chebukati uses on that particular end.
Let's allow Faris now to challenge what you've said, because
I just needed to say that when we are auditing elections, what are we doing? We are re-prosecuting elections. Okay. We are going over and above the decision of the people, and it flies in the very reason of why we vote. It goes to the same thing they were talking about, that majority of the commissioners were not.
Let's allow Faris. Faris, go ahead.
Probably, I would like to ask Maliba, because what happens is that every time we have an election, probably, we also see a lot of loss of life.
On one seat, out of 1,882.
Let's allow it. I don't have a problem with that. But you have said it very well, that somebody who has, let's say, 6.9 million votes, that is half of the country. You can't just discard them out there. And remember that the problem we are having today, Maliba, is that, Fred, who determines the majority? Who determines the majority in parliament? It's the people when they go to vote for the MPs.
Faris, I will also, we can actually just have a question. I can ask a question so that it doesn't lose the train.
We won't finish that.
I just wanted to ask that when you talk about somebody having half, do you know that a third of Kenyans did not vote? 8 million of them did not vote.
He's talking about parliamentary majority, not even about majority.
Yeah, I'm talking about those people who went to vote. Because we have seen attempts by the executive, because that one cannot go unsaid, Maliba. That one cannot go unsaid, because the people are the voters determine the majority when they go to vote, when they vote for the MPs, and it's very clear that the Kenya Kwanza coalition were the minority. But today, they are the majority in parliament.
Which numbers are you doing?
Which numbers?
I'm talking about parliamentary majority.
But who got the majority leader? at the very initial, before we talk about today.
Well, that was subject to the Speaker's ruling.
Exactly. That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm asking you, Maliba.
By what
who
numbers?
exactly determines majority?
I get
who
his
exactly
argument.
determines the majority in Parliament? It's the people when they vote for the MPs. They say we want to vote for Honorable Mutunga in
Kenya Kwanza.
in Kenya Kwanza. We want to vote the other person in Azimio. So the person who determines the majority are the voters. So I don't see why this should be a subject to the Speaker ruling and saying that these are the majority. We all know what happened there. That some of the MPs from the other side were bought.
How do you buy an
executive.
MP? How do you buy an MP? Faris, how do you buy an MP? You know, it's easy to drop around the lines like members of parliament were bought. By the way, Faris, let me remind you, when we came up with the legislature, it was supposed to play the oversight role. It doesn't matter whether he's from UDA or not.
Questions are
he
being
is supposed.
Allow me to butt in here. A few issues have been raised about the conduct in Parliament. And that whole debate about how we ended up with the majority in Parliament vis-a-vis the minority. It had to take the Speaker's ruling. Yes. Honorable John Mutunga, you sit in that Parliament.
Yes, I do.
And
sit
you know
in
your
Parliament.
colleagues who were elected on the Azimio ticket.
I know.
And
I know
immediately
that.
after they were elected and sworn in as member of the National Assembly, they quickly switched sides and became part of majority.
Correct.
That is what we're questioning. And there's something else he raised, the issue of executive interference in the National Assembly, because it cannot be, it cannot go unchecked. The fact that even the parliamentary group meetings are held at State House. It did not start with UDA or Kenya Kwanza. Even Jubilee was doing the same. The fact that the National Assembly appears to be under the control of the executive.
Okay. Two issues. Number one, the National Assembly being in control, the executive being in control of the National Assembly. I do not think it is the case. There are constitutional provisions, and the House, Parliament, both Senate and National Assembly, operates as per the standing orders, which are the rules and guidelines of the House, not over anything, not imaginations or what people might want. It is the standing orders. The standing orders provide clearly that the Speaker has the full authority to decide where the majority is. Having seen that, there are also provisions in the Constitution, and there is also an act, an Elections Act. The Constitution provides that you can have pre-election coalition and the post-election coalition. And the Act also interprets this very well, and there are some regulations. So, looking at all that, the entire continuum, the Speaker was properly guided. Let me ask you, would you rather contain people in a political formation that they do not want to continue being in your opinion?
And let me ask you another question. Yeah. Would it be right for the minority leader to attend the parliamentary group meeting of the majority party in State House?
If the minority leader feels that it is representative enough, he is playing his triple role: representation, legislation, and oversight.
Because we saw the minority whip. We saw the minority whip at the Kenya Kwanza parliamentary group meeting at State House.
If the minority whip so felt that it is within his mandate as an elected leader, it does not injure his electorate, electees, the people who have elected him.
And by the way, it's not an enmity.
And you know, by the way, in the House, we do not fight. We are there as Kenyans and as friends. And therefore, we argue issues as they are supposed to be. So there are constitutional provisions, there are the standing orders, and that's what the Speaker used to make the decision. That's number one. I'm answering you.
We're almost out of time.
There is an issue, that I think he brought up, which we need to revisit a little bit. Why we think that, why the talks are formulated the way they are. The Kenya Kwanza government has completely resisted being sucked into the talks. Because that's the intention of the opposition. Containing this country into politics forever. Because in Kenya, we only think about politics. We develop politics, we eat politics, we drink politics, we live politics. We have a country to develop. We cannot develop this country if the president will be sucked into politics, the entire executive is sucked into taking care, the legislature, everybody is acting, and even the judiciary. Now, what is happening right now? Kenya Kwanza government is very clear. They have an agenda. We have a manifesto which is extremely clear and is people-centered. The president has dissociated himself from these talks. He has entrusted his majority leader to lead the talks. He has confidence in him. and therefore told him, manage this as I continue with the developmental agenda of the people. We promised Kenyans when we were going around looking for votes, we told them we are going to help you get out of poverty. And of course, you can see the many things that the country is doing.
Well,
I do not need to enumerate.
Okay.
Fred,
In that case, we shall therefore kill the demon, the politicking from the beginning to the end, from January to December, from day one to the last day of a session of Parliament.
We have 4 minutes exactly before I read the editorial comment and get some feedback from our question today. So, gentlemen, I'll give you each a minute to execute your final thoughts. I know you have a lot to say, but for now, we only have about a minute. We'll start with you, Maliba.
It's important to actually say this, that we do not know whether it's dialogue we are having or it's mediation. All those terms are different. Number two, the issues that are being asked for prosecution, specifically with the opposition side, don't make sense. You cannot mediate on the cost of living. The cost of living is reduced on 4 levels. Number one, government policy, and we've seen that robustly done. Number two, it's done on farms. If farmers don't work, or if herders, farmers, people taking care of their crops and their animals, it's not going to come down. And number three, cost of living is reduced from us as individuals when we go out to work. And then number four, there are externalities that are beyond our control. When you're talking about econometrics, I don't know whether we have got an economist on the set, but I would really love to know the unit in economics that actually says that if 2 people sit together, the cost of living will go down. So for me, that is a moving target. It was brought in belatedly. 2, we cannot prosecute the will of the people, the sovereign will of the people. When people vote and make a decision, and over and above we went to court, trying to open up that is in itself extra-constitutional. Okay. It's something that is beyond us, and we should not allow that process to continue.
Okay.
But finally, I am one of those people who believe that we do not need dialogue. It's unnecessary. It's filibustering. It is a process to actually just ensure that we are in a campaign mode continuously. It is not the best way of actually doing oversight. That the opposition has got the best way of going about these issues. But insisting on doing things the way they are doing, that is not how you prosecute the oversight or the role of an opposition.
Thank you so much, Maliba. Arnold, Faris?
Thank you so much, Fred. Probably I just wanted to do a rebuttal on what Honorable Mutunga said, that the Speaker was justified to rule that Kenya Kwanza are the majority in Parliament. And I would like to remind him that in the coalition pacts that we normally have, they state very well that you can't get into a coalition pact 3 months before the election. And you can't get out of a coalition pact 3 months after the election. So when the members of Parliament went to Parliament for swearing in, it was very clear who is the majority and who is the minority. And that one, it doesn't need the determination of Speaker. Fred, that one doesn't need that, because the people have already made their choice from the ground. And these are the challenges that you are now seeing us having, because even Azimio can't feel like they are well represented. Because if the Speaker can make those determinations, and remember that the Speaker himself was one of the principles of Kenya Kwanza. So how do you expect to get justice if you are good in a high court? Okay. You can't.
Thank you.
Probably to end it all, Fred, probably as we wind up, Maliba says that he doesn't like dialogue, and he doesn't see the need for it because he feels that probably we should be working on the economy. I want just to remind him that the economy might not actually be coming up very well.
And that is exactly what the opposition is doing to ensure that we are stuck in this rat.
We have the man we put the house on the hill.
The man we finish up so that we give
the man we put the man we put in the house on the hill is right now. If you look at him, the president, he is campaigning. He is on campaign trails. Okay. This is why he is
opinion is free, but fact is sacred.
Finally, Honorable John Mutunga gets to wrap up this conversation.
I think we need to meet Faris somewhere else for a longer discussion on some of these issues, because I think he's still living in those times. Let me say this. When decisions are made, they are made for posterity. Decisions that affect the running of an institution like a government, they are not made so that you can revert, you can change them the day after tomorrow or 2 days after. Now, when it came to making a decision on which side has the majority, already intentions had been expressed by many political parties. We will be joining you anyway. there was to and fro from the registrar of political parties. He remembers the many letters that there were. The registrar of political parties did not deregister any. So they were all falling in. They had already declared their intentions to be there.
We have timelines that must be adhered.
Let's allow you to finish.
I'm saying that when decisions are made, of course, are for posterity. So the Speaker was task-guided. He did not make a mistake. Now, the Kenya Kwanza government has clearly said they would like to engage in these discussions as long as there are no threats, there is no intimidation, there is no demonstration, intimidation for demonstration, and there is no handshake coming in. And that's why they said we want to do it in an open forum at Bomas of Kenya. That's wisdom.
Okay.
We will all see what is happening. Whoever brings in slips in anything that we do not like. As Kenya will say, Kenya's made a decision on 8th of August last year.
Thank you so much.
And that's it.
Honorable John Mutunga, MP Tigania West, Maliba Arnold, Public Policy Analyst, and Faris Jain, National Chairperson, Mount Kenya College University Students Association. Thank you. That was our panel this morning, helping us understand issues that are featuring on the headlines on the dailies today to do with education and even the dialogue that has been much anticipated and is set to kick off tomorrow. Right now, let's get some feedback on our question today with Stanley before I read the editorial comment.
Well, thank you, Fred. And the question of the day today is, as we mark 1 year after elections, are you satisfied with the choice you made at the ballot? And a number of your feedback really resonates with the presidential elections and ballot. But then remember, there are 6 elective posts: the president, governor, senator, woman representative, MP, and also MCA. So apart from the president, what do you feel? Are you satisfied with the other 5 elective posts? Briefly, on Facebook, TV47 Kenya, Brian Aujembe says, voting for President Ruto is the best thing I did for this country. Tumpes Philip says, yes, President Ruto. George Nyangweso made good choice by voting for Raila. Kevin James Mogusu, I made a right choice. I didn't vote for William Ruto. I can't imagine re-electing a president who is still in campaign moods and keep promising people as if he's not a president. And someone here says, Vincent Midega, the choice people made has really costed them and they're regretting out here. So next, before voting, think twice, and anyone should not campaign pardon me, on lies. Hesbon Omoyo says, yes, the economy was going on a dark pit, but now it's improving slowly. Handshake with the emoji of 2 hands there, killed us with a subsidy of their own stomach. And Kemsa, just one last one here. Okay, a number of people here say no, yes, 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 and yes. We'll be taking a look at your feedback and what you're saying. Remember, as we mark 1 year, it is about 365 days today. Last year, time like this, the country was preparing for the August 9th general elections to be cast the next day. So what are you satisfied with? Not only the president's vote, but also other ballots. From that, back to you, Fred, for the editorial.
Now, in a matter of hours, we'll mark a significant milestone. 1 year since we Kenyans exercised our democratic right and made our voices heard through the ballot. As we commemorate this occasion, it is an opportune time to scrutinize the changes, both positive and otherwise, that have shaped our lives. Truth be told, we have obsessed over the presidential election for 1 year straight. We're still doing it. Was it fair? Was it legal? Were the servers secure? Was the state as deep or shallow as we had imagined? Truth be told, we're still doing it, and we'll continue with that conversation. But in our obsession with the presidency, we may have denied ourselves the opportunity to examine the appropriateness of the other leaders we elected on August 9, 2022. Today presents an opportunity for us to do so. Are you happy with the MCA, governor, member of the National Assembly, and Senate that you elected? Or is it too soon to ask this question? We at TV47 feel it is time to challenge the status quo and ask the tough questions. Are our leaders holding themselves accountable for their promises? Are they being transparent in their decision-making processes? Are the projects and initiatives promised during campaigns materializing on the ground? Are they addressing the pressing issues that impact our neighborhoods and communities? Are our leaders genuinely and actively engaging with us? Is our National Assembly driving impactful legislation that addresses the challenges we face? Are senators advocating for policies that defend and promote devolution? Are our county governors demonstrating commitment to equitable development? Are these questions too many? It is easy to become